80th Anniversary Ohioana Awards. I'm your host, David Weaver, Director of the Ohioana Library Association. We're delighted that you could join us tonight. While we thought this would be live and in person at the Ohio State House, we changed our plans due to the recent upsurge in COVID cases. By going virtual, we can still celebrate, but safely. So let me start by thanking our media partner, the Ohio Channel, which not only is streaming the awards live on Facebook and YouTube, but has graciously made their studio available for this program. And a heartfelt thanks to the funders whose generous support has made this event possible. The Columbus Foundation, the Myers Wyatt Cooper Company, Cover to Cover Books for Young Readers, Huntington Bank, the Ohio Arts Council, Boris Sater, Seymour and Peace, Larry and Donna James, Peter and Betsy Niehoff, AVAP, Crab Brown and James, Honda, Margaret Wong and Associates, Hyde Park Lumber and Design Center, and Overdrive. And thanks also to our media and in-kind supporters, Columbus Makes Art and 92.9 FM, WCBE, PXP Ohio, and our official bookseller, the Book Loft of German Village. You can get copies of all the winning titles online at thebookloft.com. My thanks also to the Ohioana Board of Trustees, John Sullivan, President, for their support, and the amazing Ohioana staff, Catherine Powers, Courtney Brown, and Miriam Nordine. And so now we begin our awards with the presentation of the 2021 Walter Rumsey Marvin Grant. Named for Ohioana's second director and endowed by his family, the Marvin Grant is a competitive prize given to an emerging Ohio writer aged 30 or younger who has not yet published a book. Winning the Marvin Grant has helped to launch a number of successful authors, several of whom have come back later as Ohioana Book Award winners. Earlier this year, Dr. Marvin's widow, Bea Appleton, passed away at the age of 101. We dedicate tonight's Marvin Grant in her memory. And here to introduce 2021's recipient is Stephen Moore of the Columbus Foundation, which sponsors the award through the Marvin Fund. Stephen?
Thank you so much, David. And I'm pleased to introduce Hagen Faye Whiteleather, a native of Alliance, Ohio. She holds degrees from Kent State and Iowa State Universities, where she served as an editor for both their literary journals. She currently teaches creative and critical writing at Kent State and has a memoir in progress entitled Tangled in the Roots. Hagen Fey, we're so pleased to join with Ohioana in saluting you as the 2021 Walter Rumsey Marvin Grant recipient. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I am so thankful to the Ohioana Library Association, not only for reading my work, but for liking it. Truly, I am immensely grateful to have my writing recognized by such an important Ohio institution. I deeply appreciate the late Dr. Martin and his family for encouraging and supporting young writers trying to put their words into the world. So thank you. The essay submission that received this award centers around a person living and dying with cancer. My father used to joke that if I ever found myself hard up for material, I could just write about him because he was so interesting. For most of my life, I rarely wrote about my father. If I did, he was on the periphery or the margins of a story. But after he got sick, he became the only thing I could write about. Every sentence I strung together came back to him. I think I was trying to keep him here the only way that I could on paper. Even though he died 3 years ago next week, sometimes I feel his shadow when people meet bits of him inked to the page. He loved meeting strangers, so there is some power to the fact that he's still introducing himself even now and to your readers. It would also be a gross oversight if I didn't thank the people who encourage and inspire me every day. My former instructors, especially the late Kim Weinbrenner, for their kindness and wisdom. My friends who graciously read and reread the same essay 17 times to see if this version is just a little bit better than the last. To my family who generate more material than I'll ever be able to translate to the page. To my Aunt Shirley for teaching me how to read in her hammock. And to my mother who taught me to love and live in stories. I would have nothing to say without you. The only words I have left now are thank you so much.
Thank you, Hagen Fey, and congratulations once again. You can read 2 of Hagen Fey's winning essays in the fall issue of the Ohioana Quarterly. And thank you, Stephen Moore, and thank you, Columbus Foundation, for your support. And now, on to the 80th Ohioana Book Awards. First given in 1942, they are the second oldest state literary prizes in America. Winners have included almost every major Ohio writer and illustrator of the past 80 years. Nearly 500 books have been honored since 1942, and tonight, 7 more titles will join that distinguished list. We begin with our newest prize, the Reader's Choice Award. Created for the 75th Anniversary Awards, it gives readers the chance to vote in an online poll for their favorite book from among all 30 finalists. Our winner is Tiffany McDaniel for her novel, Betty. To introduce Tiffany is a writer and a past Marvin Grant recipient herself, Negesti Kadu, who serves on Ohioana's board and chaired this year's Fiction Awards. Welcome, Negesti.
Thank you, David. Tiffany McDaniel's Betty is a coming-of-age novel that has the courage to look into darkness to find the light. Born and raised in Ohio, Tiffany is also a poet and visual artist. She won her first Ohioana Reader's Choice Award in 2018 for her debut novel, The Summer That Melted Everything. Congratulations, Tiffany.
Tiffany, you're on mute.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, I just want to acknowledge all the amazing books that I'm in the company of tonight. And because this is Reader's Choice, I also want to thank all of the amazing readers who are awarding me this prize. I'm honored to have your kind support always. And my guest tonight is my mother, Betty, who was the inspiration for my book, Betty. I chronicled her life, her coming of age. So to write about my mother, my grandparents, and generations of my family was an incredible journey. And both me and Mom send you our love and thanks and deepest appreciation for your support of this book.
Congratulations, Tiffany, especially on becoming our first 2-time Reader's Choice winner. And thank you, Negesti. Our next award is in the category of Book About Ohio or an Ohioan, sponsored by PNC. This year's winner is Carole M. Genshaft for Raggin' On, The Art of Amita Robinson's House and Journals. The book was created as a companion to the exhibition of the same name, curated by Carole and sponsored by PNC, that drew record crowds to the Columbus Museum of Art. From PNC, I am pleased to introduce Shannon Morgan. Welcome, Shannon.
Thank you, David. The life and art of Amita Robinson is something all the people of Columbus and Ohio can take pride in. PNC Foundation, through our PNC Arts Alive initiative, was proud to support the Columbus Museum of Art's year-long celebration of Amita, Ragging On. Carole Genshaft, the museum's longtime curator, edited the fabulous book that was created for this exhibition. Carole, on behalf of Ohioana, PNC, as a museum trustee, and most especially on behalf of everyone who loves Amita Robinson, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I want to just start by thanking the Ohioana Library for this award and helping us get the word out about Raggin' On, the Art of Amita Robinson's House and Journals. I also want to thank the Columbus Museum of Art and especially our executive director, Nanette Macy-Junes, for always supporting this project in such an overwhelming way. And hats off also to our book designer and producer Lucia Marquand in Seattle, and also to Ohio University Press for distributing the book. I might add that it's sold out, and that's a really unusual thing to happen to a museum publication. I also want to thank our in-house editors, Elizabeth Hopkin and Nicole Romay, who was in charge of the beautiful photographs that are throughout the book. And I want to thank our scholars who took such a meaningful look at Amina and an examination of her work. Deidre Hamler, who is my co-curator of the exhibition, wrote an insightful essay about Amina's home studio. A close friend of Amina's, Deborah Priestley, shared her personal insights. Scholars Lisa Gale Collins of Vassar and Lisa Farrington of Howard University considered Amina from a contemporary viewpoint. Ramona Austin, an independent curator and art historian, looked forward to future projects involving Amina and her work. And Ted McDaniel, emeritus professor of music at Ohio State, explored Amina's really interesting musical writings. But most of all, my sincere thanks go to Amita Robinson herself, who for years was most open to sharing her work and her ideas in an effort, as she said, to fill the blank pages of American history. Her story is our story, and her constant belief in the African concept of Sankofa, the necessity of understanding the past in order to live and move forward, seems starkly relevant today. Amina loved books. She loved making them. She loved reading them. When we went into her house after she left it to the museum, we found that she really lived in a library. So she would be just overjoyed and very proud to receive this award today. And just one more shout out to my family, especially my husband, Nelson, who is always behind all my undertakings and was the first reader of my essay for the book about Amina's journals. So it really does take a village. So thank you very much. And congratulations to all the other winners as well.
Thank you, Carol, and congratulations. And I might mention too that Amita Robinson won the Ohioana Career Medal in 2003, the year before she won the MacArthur Genius Grant. So we did have an association with her at the Ohioana Library, and we're very proud to say that she is from Columbus and Ohio. So congratulations again, Carol. And thank you, Shannon, and thanks, PNC. The Nonfiction Book Award, sponsored by the Myers-Wright Cooper Company, is the oldest of the Ohioana Book Awards. I might mention that the first winner was James Scotty Reston 3 years before he won the first of his 2 Pulitzer Prizes. So we've always honored the best of the best at the Ohioana Awards. This year's winner in nonfiction is Aimee Nezhukumatathil for World of Wonders. To introduce Aimee, I'm pleased to welcome Peter Niehoff, an Ohioana board member and the co-chair of the 2021 Ohioana Book Awards. Peter?
Thank you, David. World of Wonders is a collection of essays about the natural world and the way its inhabitants can teach, support, and inspire us. Aimee Nezhukumatathil is also the author of 4 poetry collections. A graduate of the Ohio State University, she now teaches at the University of Mississippi in Oxford. Congratulations, Aimee.
Thank you so much. I'm so bummed that we can't be there. I was going to turn this into a football weekend, but thank you, Ohioana. That's what you get when you give an award to a double Buckeye alum. So I had to throw in football in there. Ohioana, I've known about you since I was an undergrad at Ohio State. So thank you so much for that. And to my publisher, this little indie publisher called Milkweed, they were the ones who took a chance on this book about the outdoors, featuring a brown girl who is a big nerd and also has crushes and also loves her family. I didn't ever see anything quite like it growing up, and Milkweed did not ever flinch when I said, by the way, I would like to have it illustrated. And because I'm such a nerd, I just had to show this real quick. This is the Potu bird, one of the birds, one of the animals that I write about. And that was my expression, David, when you sent me an email saying that I won the award. And that's an actual bird. It's not a Muppet. So it's in the book. It's one of my favorite birds on the planet. Publishing a book, you all know, is no joke during a pandemic. So to the booksellers who are essential workers, thank you so much. To Barnes & Noble for getting my name out there in a way that I never thought possible. Thank you so much as well. Books help us feel not alone, even in the middle of a pandemic. So thank you, booksellers, for taking care of our hearts and our minds. I would be remiss to not mention marketing wonder women of milkweed, and that is Yana and Claire Lane. Thank you so much for never backing down through a global pandemic, and for being so scrappy and getting word out about beautiful books from milkweed. My parents, my Filipino mother, my Indian father, you were my first models for what it means to have wonder and astonishment about the outdoors, even in a world that was pretty hostile to you many times. So thank you so much for modeling that for me. And to my two little boys who I think are zoomed out, I don't think they're watching, Pascal and Jasper, and to my husband, Dustin, all three of you are the greatest wonders of my life. Thank you so much.
Congratulations, Aimee. Thank you so much. And thank you to Peter Niehoff. Thanks to the Myers Y. Cooper Company. And next we present the Ohioana Award in Fiction. This year's winner is Carter Sickels for his novel, The Prettiest Star. The Fiction Award has been sponsored since 2011 by the law firm of Borey, Sater, Seymour, and Pease. Dan Shuey, a partner in the firm and the past president of Ohioana's board, will introduce Carter. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, David. Carter Sickels' powerful novel, The Prettiest Star, has been called heart-wrenching and brutally fresh. In addition to the Ohioana Award, it won the 2021 Southern Book Prize and the Weatherford Award. Carter's work has appeared in a number of publications, and his debut novel, The Evening Hour, was made into a feature film that premiered at the 2020 Sundance Film Festival. Congratulations, Carter.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan, for those kind words. And it's a tremendous honor to be given this recognition for my work. And just want to thank everyone at the Ohioana Library Association, including David Walker, all the board members, the judges. It's such a privilege to be here with the other recipients and to be recognized alongside them and all the nominees. You know, your work inspires and teaches me. Immensely grateful to everyone who has supported and encouraged me over the years, individuals, organizations, too many to name that helped with this book. But I do want to thank my stellar agent, PJ Mark, and everyone at the extraordinary Indie Press, Hub City Press, for their tireless work and vision and their absolute belief in this book. And I want to thank all my dear friends and family who have shown up for me. I want to thank my mother for being here right now. All the independent booksellers who helped get my novel into the hands of readers. And thank you to all my readers, those who have shared the book, have told friends about it, shared it in book clubs, taught it in universities. And I especially want to thank my partner, Jose Cruz, for his love and generosity and support. And, you know, I accept this award in honor of and with gratitude for those whose lives were cut tragically short by AIDS and who are not here to tell their stories. This book would not have been possible without all the queer writers, artists, and AIDS activists who came before me and those who are here now and who make the world a better, more just and beautiful place. Thank you.
Thank you, Carter, and congratulations, and thank you to Dan Shuey and Bordy, Sater, Seymour, and Peace. I might say, I want to just ad-lib very quickly here, but of course, had we been at the Ohio State House live and in person, we'd have been presenting physical awards to each of our award winners, and we actually happened to bring here Carter, this is the award that will be coming your way in the mail. This year being the 80th anniversary of the Ohioana Awards, we created a new design, and each award is actually the state of Ohio in shape, with the cover of the winning author's book in color in the center. So if you see that award there, The Prettiest Star to Carter Sickels, and each one of our winners, book award winners tonight, will be receiving a similar award. So congratulations again, Carter, and so be looking for this in the mail. So anyway, thank you again and congratulations. And now on to poetry. The Ohio Arts Council funds programs and organizations with state tax dollars to encourage cultural growth, educational excellence, and cultural enrichment for all Ohioans. It also presents the annual Poetry Out Loud competition for the state of Ohio, which Ohioana is pleased to be a part of. And since 2011, OAC has sponsored the Ohioana Book Award in poetry. This year's winner is Marianne Chan for her debut collection, All Heathens. Marianne will be introduced by Chiquita Mullins-Lee, Arts Learning Program Coordinator at the Ohio Arts Council, our award sponsor. Chiquita?
Thank you, David. All Heathens is a declaration of ownership, of bodies, of histories, of time, which poet Marianne Chan revisits Magellan's voyage around the world to navigate her Filipino heritage. Marianne is a PhD student and a graduate teaching assistant at the University of Chicago. Congratulations, Marianne.
Thank you so much, Carole. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. Thank you so much, Chiquita, for that introduction, and also to the Ohioana Library and the Ohio Arts Council for this wonderful honor. I'm so excited to be here with such wonderful writers. When All Heathens was accepted for publication, I really didn't know what to expect. And what I gained from its publication is friendship and community, readers who've been kind enough to tell me that they can relate to the poems in this book. And growing up on 3 military bases in Germany and in a small town in Michigan, I often struggled to find others who could connect with my experiences. So I'm incredibly grateful to know that others do. So I first want to thank Saraban Books for sending this book out into the world. Then I want to thank the writing communities I've been a part of at Michigan State University, the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, Florida State University, and the University of Cincinnati. I've been so lucky to have met such wonderful writers who inspire me and who have helped me grow. I also want to thank my partner, Clancy McGilligan, who has been always a source of inspiration for me and someone who I admire as a writer and as a human being, someone who tells me to go for it when I'm uncertain about my own abilities. I wouldn't have been able to publish this book without you. I'd also like to thank my brother, who I met back in 1988 when he was 2.5 years old and I was a newborn. I couldn't have asked for a better person to circumnavigate the world with. Kuya, I learned so much from you about what it means to be an artist and a thinker. Thank you for always being my best friend. And I'd like to thank my mom, Patricia, and my dad, Jack, my muses, for being such wonderful parents. Thank you for sharing your stories with me, for making me lugaw when I'm sick, for making me sing karaoke when I'm sad or tired, for always modeling care, generosity, creativity. And lastly, I'd just like to thank the Filipino communities that I've been a part of in Michigan, in Germany, and in Ohio. Thank you to my Filipino family members all over the world. You make life so rich and so beautiful, and this book is really for you. So I just want to say thanks so much and congratulations to the other writers here.
Congratulations, Marianne, so much. And thank you to Chiquita and to the Ohio Arts Council. The award in juvenile literature is given to authors who write for a very special audience, children. This year's winner is Thrity Umrigar for her book, Sugar in Milk. Thrity will be introduced by longtime Ohioana board member Lisa Evans, who was also a vice president at Huntington Bank, the award sponsor. Lisa?
Thank you, David. Sugar in Milk is a timely and timeless picture book about immigration that demonstrates the power of diversity, acceptance, and tolerance. Thrity Umrigar, herself an immigrant who came to the United States in 1983, is the best-selling author of 7 novels, a memoir, and 3 books for children. Thrity, on behalf of Huntington Bank and Ohioana, congratulations.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you, and thank you to Ohioana Library. I assume that this means that I have to go tomorrow and open an account at Huntington Bank. But on a more serious note, I would be remiss to not start my list of people to thank with not thanking my collaborator, the illustrator of Sugar and Milk, Koa Le, a young, brilliant artist who lives in Vietnam And just the fact that we collaborated, and also to thank my editor and the entire editorial staff at Running Press, which is based in Philadelphia. So here I am sitting in my office in Ohio, in Cleveland, talking, sending notes to my editor in Philadelphia, who then communicates with this brilliant collaborator. I really think, I mean, I'm getting the award, but this award belongs as much to Koa as it does to me. I also want to thank my father, who has been the inspiration, not just for this story, but for all stories, for my own story. I want to thank my partner, Eustathia Kaboris, who has been a rock my entire writing career. Every time I've hesitated to jump, she has pushed me over the cliff, and somehow, so far, I've landed on my feet and not on my face. This award feels pretty significant to me because, as Lisa said, I came to Ohio, directly to Ohio, to attend Ohio State. Got a master's degree from there about 100 years ago. And Ohio has been home ever since, you know, and it has been family ever since. And the book is a retelling of an old legend that I grew up hearing. And it's sort of the origin story of how my ancestors arrived in India 1,000 years ago as what we would today call refugees from what used to be Persia. And it's a story about many things: kindness, hospitality, generosity, wit, all these things. And the lessons of that story, of that legend, have really worked as a kind of blueprint for my own life as an immigrant in Ohio. So this award somehow ties, I really feel the sense of a circle complete. It ties all the disparate strands of my life. And for that reason, it just means a great deal to me. And because this is a book about a community that most of the world has never heard of, called Zoroastrians or Parsis, as they are known in India, I'll just end by telling you that the entire religion, one of the oldest recorded religions in history, can be summarized in 6 words: good thoughts, good words, good deeds. And that's it in a nutshell. And I wish all of you good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. Thank you.
Thank you, Thrity. Congratulations, my dear friend. And thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Huntington Bank. Our final book award is in the category of middle grade and young adult literature. Our winner is Jacqueline Woodson for Before the Ever After. Introducing Jacqueline will be Malia Wolf, owner of Cover to Cover Books for Young Readers, which is sponsoring the award. Welcome, Malia.
Thank you, David. Cover to Cover is pleased to join Ohioana in honoring one of our favorite authors, Jacqueline Woodson. She has won numerous awards for her many books, including the National Book Award, the Hans Christian Andersen Award, and 3 Coretta Scott King and Ohioana Awards. She's a 2020 MacArthur Genius Grant recipient. In January, she will become the next educated artist in residence at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. Her novel in verse, I'm holding here, is Before the Ever After. Explores how a family moves forward when their glory days have passed and the cost of professional sports on Black bodies. Congratulations, Jacqueline.
Thanks so much, Malia. Can everyone hear me okay? Oh, good. Oh man, I miss you, Malia. I miss you, David. I miss the whole Ohioana crew and Columbus crew. And I'm so glad to be tonight surrounded by you and surrounded by writers. We know that this is an oftentimes lonely profession, and COVID did not help that at all, except we were lonely with our families around us, but not with fellow writers all the time. So I'm just grateful to be in this room with you. I'm so grateful to receive this award for Before the Ever After, which is a book that's really close to my heart. And I'm grateful for my dad, who was a football player, Jack, who lives there in Columbus, Ohio, and my aunt Ada, who's a genealogist, who's also in Columbus, and my beloved Juliet, who is not here with me. I'm up in Brewster, New York, and she and my son are back in Brooklyn because I needed to escape Brooklyn to get some writing done. So I departed and came up here alone. I'm really grateful to my publisher and to my editor, Nancy. And I'm grateful to live to have seen another day and to have been a part of this celebration tonight. I love the way we can find ways to gather, even if it's not in the same physical space. So I am so grateful to Ohioana too for the recognition of independent bookstores and independent publishers. It means so much to us as a community. I think people sometimes forget, and we're being reminded with COVID, right, that a thing that impacts an individual impacts a community, and the loss of an independent bookstore impacts a community. The loss of an independent publisher impacts a community, and their presence in our lives creates this amazing literature that we're seeing tonight. So I'm grateful to you. I'm grateful to the independent bookstores, the independent publishers, and to the people who see the enormous worth of the work in the world that they bring. So thank you so much. And I will actually be in Ohio, I think next month in real life. So hopefully I'll get to see some of y'all in person. But until then, thank you, and please stay safe.
Congratulations, Jackie. Thank you.
Thanks.
And Jackie, I might mention, this is your third Ohioana Book Award, which ties you with someone who I know was a great inspiration to you, the late Virginia Hamilton.
That's amazing. My new book is dedicated to her. That's
wonderful. Awesome. Yes, wonderful. Well, congratulations. Thank you again. And thank you, Malia Wolf, and thank you, Cover to Cover, for sponsoring the award. And that does bring us to the end of the actual awards ceremony, but don't go anywhere because we're not done yet. Right now, we're going to present something that has become a very popular tradition at our annual awards celebration, a special roundtable with all of our winners talking about their creative writing process, their inspiration, and whatever else comes up. And to moderate our panel, we're delighted to welcome Dan Shellenbarger, the creator and host of the Ohio Channel's author discussion program, Book Notes. So Dan, take it away.
Thank you, David, and congratulations to all you writers. It's so wonderful to be here with such a well-written group. So we have 30 minutes, and what we're going to do, I'm going to spend the first 25 minutes where I'm going to ask you some questions, but I want to save about 5 minutes for this lightning round where I'm going to ask you these 1 or 2 word answer kind of questions here. But I wanted to start off with, they say that every writer starts as a reader. So I'm wondering what inspired you to write? And I think I'd like to start with Aimee. One of the reasons is because you beat my last name by 2 letters with a name like Shellenbarger and yours being Nezhukumatathil. So I'm going to give you the winner of the last name contest a way to start. What inspired you to write?
All right. Oh, come on, Dan. You can say my last name better than that. It's Nezhukumatathil.
Nezhukumatathil.
Close. We'll go. I'll give you that. Just because you knew what it's like to grow up with a long last name, so I'll give a pass on that. But
that's why we became writers. We had to learn to spell our own names, and after that, boom, right?
Well, it's to also learn about other people as well. But yes, Dan, I loved reading. I think all of us loved reading, but my parents always dropped me off in the kids section, which the kids section is so vibrant and so full now. In the 70s, it was not so much, at least not the libraries that I went to. And I wanted to see about volcanoes. I wanted to see about potu birds. I wanted to see about different plants and shells. And I just never saw anybody that looked like me when I got to the back of these exciting nature books. And I'm still kind of a big nerd, and I love, that's my idea of a good time, is reading about the world around us. And that's really kind of, I think that's where I started putting metaphors and description and music together. So my home training is poetry. And I just wanted to put into poetry what I saw, not only in books, but in the outdoors around me as well.
So the library kind of served as that centering, that kind of space that opened the mind up to the use, the art of words.
Absolutely. I mean, it was a place where nobody ever asked me what I was. I was usually the only Asian girl in the middle of Iowa or Kansas or wherever my family moved around so much. But the one place that was like kind of this home central was A, the outdoors, but B, librarians. They were the only ones that could match my curiosity, and they never got impatient when I asked them questions, and I think they were just befuddled that this little Asian girl just had a million questions about shells or squids or jellyfish, and they never made fun of me. So yeah.
That's awesome. And that's another reason why our libraries should always be well funded, because they just make more writers. So that's great. I'm sure there's mass love coming from the librarians. Carter, what about you? What inspired you?
Did you say my name? I couldn't hear.
Yes, Carter.
Yes. Well, I had sort of a similar experience. I mean, my mother would take me to the library, every couple of weeks in Ohio. And actually, I think that would have been Reynoldsburg. I would just come back with like these huge stacks, of books. Then I'd go back again. And then also we would get treats and go to the bookstore occasionally and get to buy a book. But, I was a quiet kid. And I think that reading, for me, let me experience these other worlds, maybe see aspects of my own world represented, and just gave me a way to, connect with people, and kind of gave me a language that I didn't have was harder for me, I think, in speaking, but reading. And then, that sort of led me naturally to writing. I was always writing when I was young. I was writing stories, and, didn't realize until I was in college, which was at Ohio University, that I could study creative writing and be a writer. So.
Can you recall like a book that maybe just really kind of settled in your mind and made you think, I think I might want to try to do this?
Well, I think when I was like a very young teen, I was obsessed with S.E. Hinton's work, The Outsiders, and I, and she published when she was 16. So I thought I was also going to publish my first book when I was 16. It's a little bit later than that. But yeah, I think that she created this world, where there really weren't parents, and there were all these kind of guys taking care of each other, and these sort of brothers. And I think that really sort of stuck with me when I was young, and I wanted to write a book like that.
That's great. Thank you. Carole, how about you? What inspired you?
I'm trying to unmute. There we go. Well, I kind of had, I had all those wonderful memories of reading when I was young, but I had been working with Amita Robinson for close to 25 years. And I found her just fascinating and mesmerizing. And actually my first meeting with her was to write a brochure for one of her exhibitions at the museum. I was in the education department, and I walked into that house and I was just blown away. And she was like a muse. And, I found that we interviewed people for the exhibition, and many, many people had the same response to her. She was just something, there was something sacred, something mystical, something, I don't know, just magnetic. And she was definitely someone I wanted to write about. And it's been wonderful to be able to involve other people writing about her as well.
So it started with you, with a person. The person is what brought you to the table to start pounding out words to make this happen.
And of course, Amina loved words. And probably the most amazing thing about after she left her estate to the museum, we knew there'd be a lot of art because she got up at like 4 a.m. to work, but she wrote over 150 journals. and she wrote poetry and she wrote prose, and words were just really important to her as well. So it's really fitting that she really gets this award.
That's great. Marianne, how about you? What inspired you?
Yeah, I've always loved reading and writing. The first thing I ever wrote was called The Slimy Dragon Demon in 3rd grade, which was this like little horror story that I wrote in collaboration with my boyfriend at the time. So I've always enjoyed writing. I've always enjoyed reading. But when I was in high school, I was a theater kid. And I always thought of theater as a kind of reading and writing practice, because you're not only, reading the plays and analyzing them with others, you're also thinking about your character, thinking about motivations, thinking about objectives. And after I graduated high school, I decided that I wanted to focus more on the writing side. And so I think that theater was a really helpful gateway for me as a writer.
So in theater, do you think that one of the things that you might bring to the writing is the sense of the visual as well as the dialogue? Do you think it comes from a couple of different areas of the brain?
I don't know. I think so. I think that for me, what theater gave me was sort of like a way to kind of understand voice and learn about different voices and how I could bring that into my poems, bring persona into my poems. And also, I think that it also helped me just like learn about character and human psychology as well. Yeah.
Great. Jacqueline, what about you? What inspired you?
I've known I wanted to be a writer since I was like 7 years old. And I think the thing that cemented it, that really made me know this is what I'm going to do no matter what happens, was reading Hans Christian Andersen's The Little Match Girl, and just being stunned by the devastation of it. And, coming out of fairy tales where everyone lived happily ever after. And then suddenly there is this girl dying at the end, and the deep injustice of it. I mean, I don't know if I had the language for the many ways in which it impacted me, but all I remember is saying, I want to do that. I want to do that. And I knew in retrospect, of course, I didn't know at 7, but I wanted to make people feel that way. I wanted to feel there was a catharsis to the devastation, right? Because I was reading it from this very safe place of my house or my library, because I read it many, many times. But there was also this way of realizing that in writing it, a story became on the page that made someone visible in this way. And it was also, we talk about Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop and how she talks about the importance of mirrors and windows and sliding glass doors in children's literature. And for me, that book was such a window into a world where young people starved, and where there was this deep injustice where people didn't have homes and they didn't have food. And it was so unfamiliar to me, but also the emotion of it felt real. And I was just like, I want to find a way to tell stories like this.
Yes, I've always wondered about that. It's like, and then she dies. Merry Christmas. It's
yes.
strangest kind of feeling. So, you bring up an interesting point too, that tragedy can be made beautiful or aesthetic in some ways. And that seems, we always think of beauty as something that moves us in a way that's uplifting, but how devastation can serve also kind of as an uplifting and maybe even perhaps more meaningful than just they lived happily ever after.
Yeah, it definitely resonates, but also there is hope, right? There is some hope. Even the way this little girl moved through the world, it was with this continued hope. And I think that also comes through. So you don't close the book, right? Because you see the way she's surviving through her hope until you get to that point where she's no longer surviving. And then that end, where she eventually meets her grandmother. I mean, I didn't buy all of that, but I was like, I'm good with that. I just love that there was this hope that kept the pages turning for me.
Yeah, that's great. Thrity, what about you? What inspired you?
So I grew up in India. We did not have free libraries, but there were circulating libraries where you became a member and you paid a certain amount every month, and you were allowed, I think, to check out a book. I can't remember now, every day or every few days. But anyway, there was this, anybody who grew up in a country that at one point was occupied by the Brits would tell you that the name Enid Blighton, this beloved British children's author, was just legendary, and you inhaled those books. They were all, adventure books and The Secret Seven and The Famous Five and all that. But I was a very fast reader. So I used to lie to this kindly old man who ran this little shop for profit and tell him, oh, I had checked out this book just a few days ago and I've already read it. So can I get a second book out the same day? And he never busted me. Clearly he had some accounting system and he saw right through that lie, but he just played along. And he used to pull my father aside and say, keep an eye on this one. She really loves to read and you should encourage that and all that. So to me, reading and writing they're not even two sides of the same coin. They are just one thing, it's like input and output, So I started writing at a very young age. The earliest writing that I did took the form of anonymous hate poems to my parents, so that anytime I got into trouble or anytime they refused me anything, I would just sort of scuttle away and write some rhyming poems and wait for an opportunity to sneak into their bedroom and just leave it unsigned on their bed, and always thought they were geniuses because somehow they always figured out who the writer of those poems was. But in a sense, the reasons for writing have not changed in all these years. It's to weigh in on some perceived injustice, and it is a form of expression. It's the only way I know to clear my head, express what I'm feeling. So it feels as natural as breathing. I think I would really miss it if for some reason I couldn't write. Publishing is a whole different thing, but I need to write in order to not be a crabby person that nobody wants to be around. It keeps me sane, and it always has somehow.
So you said that you're a fast reader. Are you a fast writer?
Yes. And I think part of the reason for that was I was a journalist for many, many years. I worked at a daily newspaper. So I've always told my writing students this, the whole thing that some writers, nobody in this group, but some writers have about, everything has to be right before you can, the muse has to be there, the creative juices have to be there. When you write for a daily newspaper, you cannot wait for the stars to align, before you write copy. So to me, there was a kind of blue collar work ethic in being a journalist. There was nothing pretentious about it. It was just roll up your sleeves and get to work, no matter what's happening in your life. And I think that's a skill that has really, really, I didn't know I was doing it, but for almost 17 years, I did a kind of internship, and I think it's helped me as a creative writer.
That's great. Thank you. Tiffany, how about you? What inspired you? Besides your mom.
Never to unmute this time. Like most here, I've written since I was a kid. I'd make homemade books out of notebook paper using cardboard as the cover and binding them with my mother's crochet yarn. And I would publish the books under an imprint I had named after my cat Sunshine at the time. So like most here, I was writing often, I was writing early. And, storytelling in my family has been a rich tradition. My mother is a poet, my grandfather Landon, who is heavily featured in the book Betty, used storytelling to preserve their Cherokee culture. He had come from a family where the elders only spoke Cherokee, and he was learning the English that was at their doorstep. And so storytelling became a way for them to preserve their identity and preserve their culture. And he passed that down to mom and her siblings, who passed that down to me and my sisters. And so storytelling has just been a rich tradition in our lives. And Mom always made sure that me and my sisters had books and we were reading from an early age. She always stressed the importance of books. And so, kind of writing was just something I naturally gravitated to because it was such a rich tradition in my family.
So in Betty, you actually had your mom write stories. I mean, you were the author, so your mom, Betty, wrote those stories. Was that part of that brought up from your own childhood, that you knew how to write in that voice of your mother?
Well, Mom didn't write stories for the book, but how I did it was I had done interviews with her and interviews with all the living family members. And so I'd get the experiences from them, then I would, document them down in the book. She did write the poem that begins the book. And of course, we were raised on Papa Landon stories and the gardens about the three sisters. I knew those stories growing up, and they made their way into the book. And it was just such a great opportunity, I think, to be able to go back into that past, and of course, to go back into some of the poetry that she had written as well. And it was just something that was a very good marriage of the two, I think.
That's great. Hagen Fey, how about you? What inspires you?
Well, like most of you, I was an avid and early childhood reader. I grew up with what used to be a very conventional, but now is a relatively unconventional childhood. I grew up in a farm family. So before I was old enough to reach most of the things required to help out in any way, I was kind of left to my own devices. And books were these tiny little portable worlds where I could be familiar and friends with these characters until I was needed for something that required small hands. And I also grew up with my Aunt Shirley, who's a genealogist, and she tends to a local cemetery here. And we would move from grave to grave, and she would tell me the stories of these people and expect that I remember them. So I started to write them down when I was younger to try to keep track of like this labyrinth that is her brain of the past. But I didn't really think of myself in terms of like a writer or somebody that would create something that someone else would consume. It was usually just me making sense of or keeping track of or pressing into the pages the experiences of my family, of the people around me. When I was in my teens, I read, well, I'm sure everyone has The Bell Jar, but then I fell in love with Sylvia Plath and read her unabridged journals. And when I read those, I realized just the thoughts that you have, the experiences that you have, like devoid of a grander narrative or a purpose, they can be meaningful to somebody in a different decade, in a different continent. And it feels powerful to see the way in which her voice felt like my own as I was reading her words. And so I thought, maybe I can take a creative writing class. And then it just kind of spanned from there. So it was just finding somebody else's voice that made me feel like mine could perhaps be heard.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. It's interesting in talking to writers and talking to people who try to write, a lot of people talk about the pain and the misery and what it's like to see that blinking flasher at you. Like, what are you going to do? What are you going to say? So I'm interested that do you feel as writers, is it a discipline or a compulsion? Thrity says she has to write because she would be grumpy if she's not, but do you go to wherever you go to write? Are you compulsed to do it, or do you feel like you have to do it because that's what you do to make yourself get better? That's what you do to get your books published. And Aimee, we'll go right back to you and start with you. Discipline or compulsion?
I'm going to take the right down the middle. I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's a little too, if I only said it's just a compulsion, that doesn't to me speak to wanting to get better at it, and to write through the kind of the muck and the mud of, kind of a hot mess that I just put on the page, but then I can come back to it fresh and revise it, which is my favorite part, not the writing. The writing is very difficult for me still. But I find that when I start with something that I love, when I start writing about something that I love, then it's a little bit easier, than that, and it doesn't mean that I have to love it, every subject that I'm writing about. But if I remember, I think the feeling of, number 2 pencil, and I still do, I don't actually write first on the computer. I still need to hear, I love hearing the that to me was so exciting. A box of fresh school supplies. If I think that, oh, this is for a deadline and so needs it right now, that's the quickest way to not being able to write for me. So it is a practice though. I have to practice getting in that mindset all the time. It's like, and when I don't do it, and it's okay if you don't, we're in a pandemic, sometimes you make pies, or sometimes you, make Lego buildings, with your kids or whatever, but you're making, and the writing will come back. So I never worry if I don't do it every day. I just know that if I don't do it every day, I'll just have to do double time next time, because it's like exercises, If I haven't put on a pair of roller skates in a while, I'm going to fall the next time I go, and that's okay too, I've just learned to not beat myself up over a bit, and over it. And during a pandemic, the best thing we can do is to not beat ourselves up over it even more.
Have grace with ourselves. Absolutely. Carter, what about you? Is it a discipline or a compulsion?
Yeah, I think I'm going to agree with Aimee here. I think it's a bit of both. I do feel like I need to write. It is, something that's been in me and cultivated in me since I was a kid. And it's a way of me understanding the world, a way of me understanding myself. I think I'm a better person when I'm writing, and it's a way for me to sort of be vulnerable and really honest, I think, and brave when on the page. That doesn't always work out in real life as much. And then, yeah, it's work too. It's practice, as Aimee was saying. And so I'm trying, I maybe can't do it every day, but I'm trying to sit down and work and put those hours in. And sometimes very difficult. And sometimes the work is a mess and I have no idea how I'm going to get through it or find my way out of it. But I just keep coming back.
So
trying to challenge myself.
So you talk about letting yourself feel vulnerable on the page. Does it feel like a safe space when you're writing?
Yeah, it does. But I think that there are those things sometimes I'm trying to write about, and then I think, oh no, I can't do that, right? Like I start to feel afraid and do want to kind of back out. And I've learned from just the writers whose work I love, that you have to kind of stay in those places where you feel the most vulnerable or where you feel kind of scared. And those are the scenes that you actually want to kind of lean into and stick with. And I don't think that's, an easy process, but it's one I try to work through.
Great. Carole, what about you? Discipline or compulsion?
Well, I'm so kind of privileged because I worked at the Columbus Museum of Art all these years. And I write a lot, and I guess it's, there's always a deadline. So maybe that's a bit of compulsion to get it done, but I get to write about artists and it's so fascinating. So like I'm working right now, this is actually my office. And I'm working on our next exhibition, which is Van Gogh. And I'm just really into it, and it's really wonderful. And I get to do research, and they even pay me to do this. So I'm really happy. So I guess it's the same answer. It's both. It's a love, and it's a compulsion with deadlines.
Do you ever not feel like writing? Do you ever have to drag yourself to put it down?
Yeah, well, I've kind of enjoyed working at home, because when I get like a little bit tired, I get up and maybe think about making some cookies or unloading the dishwasher or playing with the dog. And I think you have to take some breaks. And I find going outside and walking is that's very helpful. So I think, there's a time to just take a break and refresh a little bit.
Great. Marianne, is it a compulsion or a discipline for you?
Yeah, I think I'll agree with what everybody has said so far. And I liked what Carter said about writing being a way to understand the world better. I think that for me, writing is often motivated by a question. Like my poems are often motivated by questions that I have about the world. For example, I think a lot of the poems in All Heathens think about the way that the history of colonialism continues to impact Filipinos today. Like how does it continue to impact Filipinos today, including myself and my family. So that was something that I was kind of wondering as I was writing the poems in All Heathens. Sometimes I have an experience and I'm like kind of confused by my response to that experience or by like what happened during an event, and writing about it helps me to kind of either answer the question or kind of find more questions to ask about it. And so because of that, I think that maybe I lean a little bit more towards compulsion, but I think that it's helpful to me for me to also have a discipline to also be writing regularly, because when I'm writing regularly, I feel like I can kind of find my way into a poem a lot more easily.
So you mentioned finding your way into a poem. As a poet, when you're sitting down, is the poem there? Or while you're writing, is it appearing to yourself while you're making it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I like to use constraints a lot when I'm beginning to write a poem. So like, it's nice for me to like start with a sonnet or to start with some sort of constraint, like I can't use the letter I in this poem or something like that. And that helps me to kind of find my way into a subject matter or into something that I'm kind of thinking about that I'm hoping will enter the poem. So it kind of helps me to have that constraint because it distracts my like controlling mind from kind of you know what I mean? So so constraints is really helpful to me. So it's not like I come to the computer or come to my piece of paper knowing exactly what the poem is going to be. Sometimes I don't know what it's going to be, and working from constraints helps me to find it.
Yeah, great. Jacqueline, what about you? So discipline or compulsion, I'd like to add one more question to that mix. Do you ever feel like you don't want to write?
Oh, every day. Awesome. I think that's, I completely agree with what others say about it. It is both, right? And writing's a muscle, and the more we use it, the stronger it gets, and the more compelled we are to use it. And there are those moments every day when I'm like, I don't want to be sitting here doing this, but I need to press through, because I wish it could all just be compulsion and you get a book finished, right? But it's not. It's the discipline part, and the part where you do want to get up and go take a walk in the woods, and you're like, no, you already did that for today, and you already baked that cake, and you already cleaned that floor. So now you have to sit down and do this.
That's great. Thrity, what about you? Discipline, compulsion?
Neither. It's joy.
Awesome.
Short answer.
Wow, you're lucky.
So, I mean, I think it's actually true for all of us, because believe me, there are easier ways to earn a living, if we even do earn a living from our writing, than this. So we do it out of love. We do it because, as much as we might complain, and I think Jacqueline is apt, I would much rather just go for a walk and think about writing than sit on my chair. But ultimately, it's a pleasure. It's joy. There's no other reason to do it, really.
Are you ever blocked?
Do I have a blog with a G?
Block.
Or
I'm sorry. Do you ever have writer's block? Are you ever stumped?
Yeah, I think that's a mythical creature, and I just don't think about it, and I don't want to deal with it. I don't think it exists. I think we've just made that up. It's a fictional creature that writers have universally agreed to put all the blame on and act like it's real. And look, I mean, obviously there are times when, there's nothing to say, right? And I respect that. That's part of the process. It's like farming. I mean, there are times when the field has to be fallow, right? You're not just planning all the time. There's a time for harvest. There's a time for doing nothing. But I think doing nothing is every bit, I'm not just sitting and writing, 18 hours a day. I'm washing dishes and thinking about my characters. I'm taking a shower. I'm going for a walk. I'm in the old days, pre-pandemic, I would go to a movie and watch somebody else's creation, but somewhere in the back of my mind, I'm taking notes about my own work, right? So it's 24/7. It's your subconscious, right? So that's always working.
It's such a beautiful thing that it's a joy, and there's no such thing as block. I want to take what you're taking. Because sometimes it doesn't feel joyful, but I think that's a great way to think about it. You should be a writer's shrink. That could be another occupation, perhaps. Tiffany, what about you? Discipline or compulsion?
I think it's more for whether he says, about chasing your dream. If it's something you've always wanted to do, I think you're committed to making sure that dream comes true. And it also does take discipline, dedication, because as we know, you're likely going to get a ton of rejection. So I think every writer has to have that aspect to their personality as well, the ability to persevere, the ability to move forward. And I think that that's where the discipline comes in. And then I think the other half of it is just answering the call of your and doing it because you're chasing the excitement of a new idea and the excitement of a new story. So it's definitely not just limited to those two things, but discipline, dedication, that's a driving force for sure.
Great. And then Hagen Fey, how about you? Do you find it that you have to force yourself to do it, or is it just there?
Well, it depends. For me, especially on genre. And I find that I feel like if I was more disciplined than compulsion, I would be more prolific. The compulsion kind of leads me to start far more projects than I'll ever have time to finish in one lifetime. I get so excited, or I come up for fiction, if I come up with a character and I just let them live in my head for a couple of weeks or a couple of months and then decide whether or not they're going down on the page. But for nonfiction, almost everything I've ever written in nonfiction has been born of some other form of communication, a pen pal, an email, a conversation. And from that, I start to ruminate on whatever it was that we said to one another. And then that becomes a larger story, or conveying the past to somebody else to explain something from my childhood or something that happened before I was born. And I find it more interesting this time I told it to you as opposed to the 30 other times I told that story before. And I just kind of want to stretch it out and play with it on the page. So for instances like that, it's definitely a compulsion. I'm not doing it for somebody else to read it. I'm doing it because I want to make it larger in front of me. But for discipline, I would say that's definitely more in line with fiction, where I have to take this nebulous thing that is just mine out of my head and then put it out into the world. That takes effort to sit down and try to create something, as opposed to my transcribing, which is how I describe my nonfiction.
So you just said something about playing with it on the page.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in the act of writing, do you think the words are they coming from you, or are they coming from another source? Do you ever surprise yourself with your own writing?
I kind of think of it like walking through mist sometimes. Like all of a sudden it's just there, and either you're in it and you take it with you, or it dissipates. I've had far too many occasions where I knew exactly what I wanted to say or how I wanted a story to play out, but I waited too long to go to the keys with it, and then it was just gone. Like there wasn't even a single droplet left, which is probably the most gut-wrenching feeling a writer can have, because that's entirely on you for not getting it while it was there. So that's where that discipline could really come in handy. But I would say, yeah, it's one of those things where it just kind of, it feels like it's there. It feels like if you're engaging in a conversation with your characters, if they're talking back to you, if they're speaking for themselves, that's when you know you kind of have something. And it feels like playing in that case, because you are interacting with someone else, even though it's all in your own noggin.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's wonderful. We're running out of time. I wanted to ask one more question before we go into this speed round. I think as writers, as artists, in a sense, we are all teachers. When you're making something, you're kind of instructing them to your view. So with that kind of in mind, in many cases, most, if not all of you, are also teachers. What would you say to other struggling writers, people just starting out? What kind of words of encouragement or hints that you could give them, or what they just need to do? And I'm going to keep it in the same line just to make it easier for me. Aimee, we're going to go back to you.
I'd just say low stakes writing. Just take it, even if it is for a deadline, or somebody's needing it right away by the end of the week. Just try as much as possible to think of low stakes writing. And what I mean by that is it's like the little calisthenics to just keep us active. Just work on your powers of observation and description. Be noticers. I think if you're noticing things, and if you are just really trying to work on describing a smell, that's a block by block by block, you'll have a poem or a story or an essay, but for me, I have to start small. If I think of something too big, that's when I just get overwhelmed.
I think you had mentioned too that for you enjoy the rewriting process more than you like the initial writing.
Yeah. In order to get to that magic, in order to get to that place where you could play and experiment and really kind of dig in, you have to have some words on the page.
Yeah.
So throw it up there, throw something out there, even if it's a hot mess, because you can fix it later. Trust in your writing that you could fix it later. And fix is even a word I don't want to use. You can experiment with it a little bit more later.
So by low stakes, maybe you can just treat everything low stakes. Just write it out there. Don't think about it. Just write it out there. Then you get to go back and massage it.
Absolutely, but you can't revise something that's not on the page. So yeah.
Right. Great. Carter, what advice would you give to the struggling writer or the starting out writer?
I think just in addition to that, in addition to writing those kind of low stake pieces, just read as much as you can. Read widely, read deeply, read work that challenges you, read work you like or don't like, and pay attention to that and how writers, how it sort of works on the page and how the language works and how the sentence works. And then I think, believing in the story that you feel compelled to write, that you care about, trusting that and writing that story.
Great. Carole, what about you? How do we get started?
Well, I think I'm so pleased to go back to Amita, but she believed that all of us have a story, a really important story. So even if you're a writer or you're a filmmaker or you're a musician or whatever, that's what's important. It's important to just find that story. And, maybe it's going to your elders and finding your family story, or maybe it's a story you live every day, but it's really important to record it somehow. And it might, for all of us, it might not be in, words written on a page, but it could be a drawing. It could be as I said, a film, a photograph. And I think that was her message. And I think it's such a good one that all of us have. Well, I feel so honored to be among these wonderful writers who just have such great creative juices going. I come at it more from the nonfiction side. It's a little different, but I think we all have these important stories.
Great. Marianne, what about you? What advice?
Just to add to what Aimee said about low stakes writing, I had a student recently ask me, what is the most important thing I need to know while writing a poem? What is the most important thing I need to do? And I think that as I was thinking about the possible answer I could give that student, I was thinking, I think that the most important thing you could do is to not think about the most important thing, to just kind of spend some time playing on the page. And I think that starting from play and starting from joy is probably the best way to start writing poetry, because why would you keep writing poetry if it didn't allow you to play or bring you joy? So, yeah.
It's awesome. I think Thrity would totally agree with that, right? The whole joy thing that's going on there. Jacqueline, what kind of advice would you give to the struggling writers of the world?
I agree with everything everyone said before me. And then I would quote Catherine Patterson, who said, "Bic, butt in chair."
Sit down and write. Thrity, what about you? What kind of advice?
I think I would tell them not to write. I think I would tell them to go ahead and become a plumber or electrician or something else. And I would hope if they're serious, committed writers, that they would attack me and come back at me and say, no, that's shitty advice. I mean, I'm a writer. And that would be, everybody in the world doesn't have to be a writer. It's as simple as that. Just because, you heard a story, or even you might have a great family story, it's okay to not ever put that down on paper. But what distinguishes writers are people who have to do it. Maybe that's maybe I'm still answering your last question, David. Sorry, Dan. Maybe that is, you have to feel that sense of urgency. And if you don't have that sense of urgency, then really there are lots of things in life that can make you happy. So do it, And I also, the final thing I would say is follow your own light, right? I mean, who am I to chart out somebody else's course for them? There are as many ways of being a writer as there are writers. So at some point, follow your own light. And I don't think that will mislead you if you do.
Wonderful. Tiffany, what kind of advice?
I would say, just to add to that, going back to the dedication, I mean, you have to have the ability to, persevere and hang in there. And I reflect back on the story and the journey of Betty. It took nearly 2 decades to get a publisher on board with the story. And I see that many of us are women. And, one of the things that I was told during the course of trying to get this book published was that it was too female of bras and menstruation, all these sorts of things. So I think, especially as a female writer, you have to be prepared to hear something like an agent said to me, which was that I should change the narrator of Betty, who was based on my mother, to a boy because they sell better. So I think that, as writers, you have to be disciplined, you have to have perseverance. And as women writers, you have to have double that to be able to make sure that there's an equal space on the shelf to tell women's stories and to tell them as authentically as we can.
I was actually reading an interview that you had done, and I had thought that somebody had said that you needed to make it more like a Huckleberry Finn with a male writer. But, I was also just thinking about Landon in the book, where there's a scene where Landon hangs lemons from a tree. And I think that's a lesson to all of us, is that we can make our own specialness with the means that we have. We don't have to go outside of that. It's already within us, and we can kind of create that magic within our own capabilities.
For sure. Yeah. And I think, it's not to say that you refuse every single edit and stuff, but it's that you accept the edits that make sense for the criticism of the story, but then you also stay true to the story that you want to tell. And, in this case, it was a story about a girl's coming of age. And, this was 20 years ago. This was prior to the Me Too movement and prior to the new feminist conversation. So, when an agent tells you these things, they were able to get away with it a little bit more in the past than they are now. Thankfully, times are changing, but certainly stay true to the story you want to tell, stay true to the identity of the characters you want to tell.
That's great. Hagen Fey, what about you? What kind of advice? And I know you're teaching right now at Kent State. So what are the things that you tell your students?
Well, one of the most important things I always tell my students is to remember why you're writing. Almost every single person that's in a workshop class is there electively. Nobody is taking that class because their major is demanding it or because it's a requirement. They're almost all there because they love doing the thing that we're there to do, to read other people's work, to get our work read. But before it comes to being read, to being critiqued, to being understood by somebody else, you have to know your characters. You have to engage with your characters. You have to put them down. And if you're not enjoying doing that, then it's probably, like, I've never had a student who didn't enjoy doing it. You just have to remind yourself, right, that that is why you're there. If you do get frustrated, or that mythical creature like rears its ugly head, and you feel like you don't know what to write next, just go back to the thought process. Remember that you enjoy doing this thing. You enjoy creating something. It doesn't matter if it is perfect. It doesn't matter if it's published. It doesn't matter if even a single other person reads it. You created something that wasn't previously there. And there's an incredible power to that, an immense feeling that comes with creation of any kind. And my students generally need reminded of that when it comes time to turn in the final draft, but they're always exuberant by the time that they're done. And I think it's like recapturing that feeling of knowing that regardless of how good it is, or if it meets your standards, or if it's the best thing you ever written, you did at the end of the day write something. And that's kind of lovely.
Yeah, that's great. And that's empowering. That's very lovely. Okay, so we're going to do this speed round. I'm going to ask 3 questions here, just short answers on this. And the first one, I'll go in the same order. The first one is longhand or keyboard? Aimee.
Longhand all the way.
Carter.
Keyboard. Sit at the computer.
Carole.
Keyboard.
Keyboard. Marianne.
Keyboard.
Jacqueline.
Both.
Both. Okay. Amy's getting some teammates. Thrity.
Keyboard.
Keyboard. Tiffany.
Longhand.
Okay. Hagen Fey.
Nonfiction always starts with a pencil, but everything ends up at the keyboard.
That's sort of a tie. We'll go with that. Favorite place to write? Aimee.
Outdoors.
Outdoors. Interesting. Right in it. Carter.
Just at a desk, my desk in an office. Yeah.
Is the office in your house, or is it in a place away from your house?
It is in my house, but I also love to go to writing residencies, that's where I am right now, in the Adirondacks. So I have a space, in the woods to write, but inside.
Inside the woods. Okay, a step away from nature. There you go. Carole.
Well, if I had a place in the woods, I know I would go there, but I don't. So I'm here at my dining room table.
At the dining room table?
Yeah. Well, since COVID, I do have an office, but I've been here a lot. So that's where I write.
Oh, food for the mind. Jacqueline.
I have an office, which is my family's favorite place for me to write, but I like writing in the kitchen when I'm back in Brooklyn, and at this table when I'm up in Brewster.
So is there stuff going on around you, or do you have to have it quiet?
I have to have it quiet, but I always have my earphones on so I can write with stuff going on around me. I just drown it out.
Oh, cool. Thrity.
Backyard. My backyard.
Backyard. So you're outside too. You and Aimee are hanging out outside.
Not all the time. I'm not, but you said favorite place, not the place where I write most often. So favorite place to write is backyard. Yeah.
Great. Tiffany.
With my cats, Grand and Fielding.
Meow. And Hagen Fey.
My favorite place to write is not the place I write the most often, but usually on a notepad in my car or when I get back from a walk, because that's generally when I have my best ideas, when I'm trapped in a space just seeing things go by.
Oh, that's cool. All right. Wonderful. And then the final one, of course, what are you reading right now? Aimee.
I'm reading about hummingbirds.
Hummingbirds. Carter.
I'm reading Lauren Groff's new novel, Matrix, which is incredible. The sentences, I'm reading it so slowly because it's sentence by sentence. Stunning.
Wonderful. Carole.
I'm reading a book by an Israeli author called The Liar, Ayolit Gunter Goshen, and it's really quite riveting.
Oh. Marianne, what are you reading?
I just finished Arundhati Roy's God of Small Things, and now I'm reading Hysteria by Kib Yidiam.
Jacqueline.
I'm actually in the throes of writing, so I'm not reading right now, but I'm listening to Poetry Unbound. Patrick, I can't remember how to pronounce his last name, but it's a podcast on poetry, and also The Slowdown, which originally was Tracy K. Smith, but is now Ada Limon. So I'm listening to a lot of poetry and having it explained to me.
So when you're, there's Poem Talk too, which is another good podcast. So when you're writing, when you're in the throes of writing, do you traditionally not read?
I don't, or I read stuff that I've already read because I don't want new ideas in my head. I want old ones. And poetry just helps me with language.
Oh. Thrity.
The Obo Story, Richard Powers. Just started it.
Tiffany.
Like Jacqueline, I'm currently editing on a tightening deadline that, the book Knopf is going to be releasing next year. So I've just been rereading that.
Great. And then finally, Hagen Fey, what are you reading right now?
I just finished Transcendent Kingdom, which was lovely. And I have a chapter left of a retelling of Reynard the Fox. So a little bit of old time fantasy and a lovely contemporary novel.
That's great. Whenever I ask that question, nobody ever says their own work. That's kind of, I don't know how that would be received, but so that's great. So thank you all. Congratulations for these, for your awards. Thank you so much for giving your time and your insight to this. I appreciate it. I'm sure our viewers appreciate it. And I hope to see you all, maybe perhaps on Book Notes sometime. But for right now, it's back to you, David.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, award winners. This has been a wonderful roundtable and a great way to wrap up the evening. So thanks again to all those who made this evening possible, the Ohio Channel, our sponsors, donors, presenters, as well as the staff and board. And obviously, thanks to everyone out there who's joined us for this virtual event. Wasn't the way we thought we could do it, but we were glad that you could join us. And finally, thanks and congratulations again to all of our award winners. Through your writing, you touch many lives. And we're proud to say that you're from Ohio, and we hope you're proud to say that you're from Ohio too. For Ohioana, we wish everyone a wonderful holiday season and a happy and healthy new year. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.